I've started recording.
Good.
Yeah, I mean,
That's good.
I should say like I don't know a lot about this particular topic. I'm kind of new to it, so
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I understand. I'm not like a professional eater or something like that. Yeah. I've just done some Buddhist philosophy in my yeah um in my free time, and yeah, I'm a student of philosophy and physics. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Yeah. I guess so.
What is
Yeah.
your what's your like main area of focus? I don't know, do you have one? Yeah.
Um. Well, in physics, it's the physics of the small, so it's quantum physics, and quantum statistical physics. I don't know if that's familiar, but like 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 yeah, multiple quantum things. And in philosophy, it's analytic philosophy.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Um, I haven't done like a lot of courses yet, but um, yeah, I'm yeah. So that's my I'm a bachelor student. So
Right.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, but I've been meditating and in just the reading about Buddhism for I think 2 years now. Um, so yeah, um, I guess I was just yeah very interested to see yeah what you had to say. Yeah, I think our conversation really started off by um, you making your video about pessimism. Um, and I was like, oh wow, this is like the perfect combination of the first two noble truths.
Yeah.
Um, So I'm really curious what you think about that yourself. Um, if you like, I assume you weren't thinking about the first and second noble truth when you were making this video, right?
No. I no, I wasn't. I mean, I hadn't really engaged with Buddhist or generally like Asian traditions of
Mm-hmm.
philosophy much at all. Um, I think that with the pessimism thing, it was something I was thinking about, but like I wasn't thinking about it really deeply. You can always tell whether or not I'm thinking about something deeply based on the kind of video I make about it. Because if it's just a video of
Okay.
me talking to a camera,
Uh
like
huh.
then it's just a throwaway thing. It's just like, okay,
Sure.
this is something on my mind. I'll just put it out there. But
Yeah.
it's like I haven't actually. I'm not like really deeply reading the literature. Actually, that's not entirely true because I do throwaway videos on stuff that I have been. You know, don't
Okay.
listen to my account of what motivates me because I have no idea. Um, but no, I I I just came to I guess broadly pessimistic conclusions. I think actually that it's something that I know that I'd been talking about before because um, when I first did the drunk philosophy video, I don't know if you saw them,
Mhm.
but I have, yeah,
Yeah,
a
I have
couple of
some
videos.
sauna.
Yeah, there's one where I expressed similar views and my
Yeah.
friend Cole was like, "Oh, what you're saying is basically Schopenhauer," and of course,
Mm-hmm.
what Schopenhauer was saying was kind of kind of Buddhism, right?
Was basically Buddhism. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
um, so yeah, I think that I have a similar sort of perspective, but I would say that what distinguishes my approach, or I don't know if it distinguishes it because like I don't want to make claims about
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism in general
Mm-hmm.
because I'm aware that it's a very broad tradition, but what distinguishes my approach from what I understand of Buddhism is that I don't see my position as like, I mean, in some ways I'm not sure that my position is really even a philosophical position.
Mm-hmm.
It might just be more a description of my psychology. So here's the problem, right? Like when I think about suffering, um, there's this idea that like the desire for an object, when we have that like craving for an object, and it's oh you you just kind of froze
Oh,
there.
I cut out. Okay.
Did you?
I'm gonna turn my camera off. Okay.
Okay, maybe that will help. All right, can you still hear me? Okay, now I can't hear you. um, that's weird.
You can hear me now.
I can hear you now, but I couldn't hear you when you switched your camera off.
Okay, that's really strange.
Um, yeah.
Okay,
Could you?
what?
So I take it you could hear me when my camera was off.
Yes.
All right. Maybe I'll just try turning my camera off, and
Okay.
maybe that will be enough to
Yeah, sure.
keep the connection. Okay. Um,
Okay.
all right. So yeah, what I was saying was that like there's this view that when you desire something, when you have that craving for something, a craving for an undesired object, that in itself is like
Uh-huh.
a state of suffering, you know. So, and then the problem is that once you satisfy the desire, that doesn't produce any lasting satisfaction. You might get a burst of pleasure, but then you just end up producing new desires.
Yeah.
And that totally speaks to me, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
that's exactly what it's like for me when I desire things. I feel the frustration. But if you talk to other people about it, like they don't all agree with that. I mean, there are some people who will say things like, you know, the chase is better than the catch.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty common phrase, right? So for those people, it seems that being in the state of desire doesn't actually bother them at all. Like they relish it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, I mean, who am I to sort of overrule their claims about their psychology?
Yeah.
I mean, like I've so you can also see it in their kind of behavior and attitudes. Like when I think about, so I think for instance about my dad, and
Mm-hmm.
he seems to be genuinely content with his life, and he doesn't seem to be the kind of person who's particularly bothered by, you know, having a desire for something, and you know, and he's somebody I know fairly well because you know he's a family member, right? I mean, I haven't
Yeah.
spoken to him in detail about this, but I imagine if I was to express to him these kind of pessimistic views, he would just
Mm-hmm.
sort of not identify with that. Um, so I don't know whether like this like maybe this kind of pessimistic view is appropriate for people who happen to be psychologically constituted like me,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if I could say that this is just a universal conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yes. Um. Okay. I understand the worry. Um. Yeah. I yeah. I think um there are multiple ways of like formulating um what it really means for like life to be for life to be dukkha, right? That's like the term they often use. Um and um and some of them I think are dukkha sometimes also translated as unsatisfactoriness.
Mm-hmm.
Um instead of just suffering, right? Um because like most people like almost everyone, if you're asked like is your life suffering, they'll answer no to you, right?
Yeah.
Um and uh and indeed like what you're kind of saying is um like who am I to like psychoanalyze them for like oh well maybe they're not talking the truth or whatever. Yeah. um it's instead of just taking them for the word. um but um in my experience, if you sit down, like if you talk to lay people and ask them questions that are like less like loaded, um of like because it's if people think it's often bad if like that there's something wrong with them
Mm-hmm.
if if they're suffering, right? um but if like in my experience, if you ask people um like are you generally satisfied with like this thing in your life, right? Like, with this accomplishment, they'll often give you the answer of yes, I was satisfied like at the moment, um but like afterwards I um the satisfaction like decay, right? Like what they call impermanence. um and um and people seem to be bothered by that in less or more degrees, but Um, I do think there's at least some how do you say this? I don't think this is like games based psychology and um no one else can relate. Um, that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
Um,
I imagine that there are like aspects of it that would speak to most people. I
mhm,
suppose the concern is, um, so okay, I mean like I say, that kind of classic phrase, the chase is better than the catch. I disagree
mhm,
with that because like I hate chasing anything. I hate doing any kind of work under any
okay,
circumstances, right? Like I
okay,
just when I have a desire, I just want the desire to be satisfied. I don't want to have to work at it, right?
okay,
Now, but then like I don't think that's true of most people, and
yep,
I think that so if so like okay, let's take the like a simple example. I Let's say a person desires a flashy new television and they have to like work to acquire the money for it.
mhm,
The thing is that I would not enjoy that process, right? For me, it would be frustrating. But
yep,
there are a lot of people who do enjoy it. Like they enjoy that like state of craving and attempting to
yep,
satisfy the craving. Like it
yep,
seems to genuinely bring them pleasure. And then,
yep,
of course, once their craving is satisfied, well, yeah, that's not going to be lasting, right? They're just going to form new desires. But then that's
mhm,
not a problem for them because they enjoy the process of trying to
yep,
satisfy their desires.
mhm,
So it's like, you know, so it's like, well, are their lives suffering? Of course, there will be other forms of suffering. I mean, they may well experience like pains and hunger and they're going to
mhm,
experience loss that like genuinely does um, like hurt them. Um, that's I mean, I guess that aspect of like suffering is uncontroversial, right? Like we all acknowledge that,
mhm,
yeah, if I break my leg, I'm gonna suffer. Um, and then maybe they'll also like have a fear of death and all of those other like normal sort of things.
mhm,
But I think that so to me, what I really like about uh, Buddhism is this idea of almost the kind of like this ubiquity of suffering sort of claim. This claim that
mhm,
like that there's suffering almost. It's not just that you suffer from bad things that happen to your body or loss or whatever, but like even the process of satisfying a desire, even that kind of has suffering built into it.
yep,
Like even and sometimes even the pleasures that you experience kind of have suffering as like the other side of the coin. That speaks
mhm,
to me.
yep,
Um, I don't know whether it would speak to everyone, and I mean it's that sort of thing specifically where I'm just like, well, I don't know other people's. I can't get inside other people's heads. So
yep,
maybe it's the same for them. Maybe they're just lying to others or themselves. But I tend
mhm,
to just sort of take people at their word when they report their own experience. If somebody
yep,
says to me, I really love like that whole process of like craving something and working at it, and I just love
yep,
that. I mean, I just got to be like, okay, then I guess this isn't the I guess this sort of position won't mean so much to you.
yep, mhm, yeah. No, I completely agree. I think like um certain like video games, for example, right, are um, fun whether or not you lose or win, right? Um, but people still play them, right? I don't know if this is like if you think this is a good example of this, but
Maybe
um,
this explains why I don't play video games. Now that I think about it,
oh,
like I really okay. Like honestly, I really don't like working at anything. So
okay,
I mean,
yeah, um, that would explain it, yeah, um, yeah. You have those people who only like it when they're winning, but
mhm.
still, then it's like they like it when they are winning, like even in the process of them winning, right? And not just like the um not just the result. Um, so yeah, huh? Um,
You know,
Interesting.
you maybe I when I the games I used to play, like I would occasionally play games like Grand Theft Auto. Um,
Hmm.
my
Okay.
brother had them, and I when I played them, I would always like put in loads of cheat codes and then just use it, and I'd like drive around like killing people, but I wouldn't do any of the missions. I couldn't be bothered, and I didn't like because I don't like working for stuff. So I put on the like 80s music station and drive around and like knock people over, but that was the extent of my engagement with it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a bit
Huh.
of a tangent,
Uh,
but
yeah. No. It's funny. Um. Yeah. Um. It does get boring pretty quickly. Um. If you keep doing that, right? Or do you disagree?
well, I didn't get bored. I could do it for quite a while, and I know
Okay.
when I,
Mhm.
from the age of I think sort of 14 to 17, I spent quite a bit of time doing that. But maybe I didn't have anything else to do at that age. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Uh, because like in my experience, but like that's fun. Like in like for like a couple hours maybe. But after a while, I crave a challenge, right? Um. But um. Yeah. You might just not like not have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a
Um.
couple of hours would be the limit. Um, but
Okay.
then I'd probably just like move on to something else. You know, I'd be like, okay,
Okay.
time to read a book or something. You know.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Mm. Okay. Um. Hmm. Okay. Um. Just 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 to kind of see if I understand correctly. Um. Would you say yourself that um your video on pessimism is in line with the first and second noble truth of Buddhism?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
I'm kind of uncomfortable, like you know, uh, say because as I say, you know, I'm kind of new to this, so you know, there may
Hmm.
be like important distinctions or whatever
Hmm.
that like you know within the Buddhist tradition that I'm not you know sensitive to, but yeah, I mean, it seems to be like if you were to just kind of summarize those first two claims, um, it like I mean, my summary would be something like number one, life is suffering, where like even you know many of the pleasures that we experience, even the process of satisfying desires, actually just brings more suffering, and then the source of suffering is like desire or craving, and
Yep.
that seems to be true for me, at least.
Yep. Hmm.
And I think that was what I was expressing in that video. Although, it's,
Yep.
like to be honest, I can't. That video was like 20 minutes long, and I'm pretty sure I. What the hell did I talk about for 20 minutes? I,
Um.
oh, I think I talked a bit about how engaging with, like, even when you kind of engage with things like what philosophers might call the higher pleasures, that doesn't actually offer any escape. So it's like, you know, because there's that traditional view, at least among philosophers, where they might say, you know, sure, if you if you just spend your life engaging with like material pleasures, if you're just concerned with, you know, having the new television and the new car, and you just like you know you live your life in pursuit of those kind of material or sensuous pleasures, that's going to
Hmm.
be unsatisfying. So you've got to engage with you know knowledge and art, and you've got to do these like higher things, these more sophisticated activities, and that will bring meaning and play. But actually I don't think it does.
No.
It seems to me
Hmm.
that
Agree.
they have exactly the same problems. And
Yeah.
actually, I didn't. I mean, again, this was something I didn't realize at the time, but I think that one of the
Okay.
big problems is this point about impermanence, because the thing that troubles me a lot about the philosophical work that I've done is the fact that it just everything I learn just disappears, right?
Yeah.
And
You
I'm
forget,
not
right?
able, yeah, like I'm
Yeah.
not able to kind of hold in my mind uh, like all of the things that I've learned, and I'm not able to sort of see connections. Like I learned them in the past, but then they disappear, and so there's this sense that everything I did was kind of pointless. Like there isn't a lasting achievement here,
Yeah.
because I just forget it so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a Buddhist would be like, well, yeah, that's impermanence, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. The memory is impermanent in some sense, though, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So, let me try to see how far you're willing to go beyond like the things you said in pessimism. So, like, what do you think about like the third noble truth? Do you think would you still agree with, or is that where you're like gonna depart?
I don't know, because I'm still like where I'm still stuck is on conceiving of what it would be like to live without desire, and
Uh-huh.
to kind of, and I mean, especially when it's like not just a matter of, because when we talk about like overcoming desire, I can understand that in specific cases. If
Mm-hmm.
I have the desire for a book, right? I mean, I can understand like overcoming that desire. Or if I have, let's say that I have an attachment to a particular person, like I'm in love with somebody and they're not
Mm-hmm.
interested in me. I mean, if you talk about like overcoming that desire, that makes sense. And in specific cases, it's very useful. But
Okay.
when you talk about like overcoming that very, because what happens is with me, if I overcome a desire, I'll just have other desires, So, you know, um, like in that sense, it's sort of not what the Buddhist is talking about, at least as I understand it. To So I don't really think that I comprehend what state is being described in the third noble truth, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really in a position to assess whether I think it makes sense.
Okay. Sure. Give me 30 seconds. Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah. You can hear me, right? Dan?
Hello?
Hey.
Is everything okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's
Okay.
it's a bit louder now.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. I my I was seeing my internet being a little bit shaky, so I wanted to switch. Yeah. Um. Okay. So like you said, okay, you're just not sure what it would be like to have a state in which you do not decide. So you cannot say if you would really like get on board with the third novel truth. Um, Going back to the second novel truth. The second novel truth kind of reduces all forms of suffering to desire. It says like there are no like other forms, which would imply, if you agree with that um, no desires means no suffering in it, right? Because like all desires would be coming. Um, is it is your doubt like originally in the second um, noble truth, or is it more oriented around like maybe the third noble truth is right, but I don't know if I would want to be in that state.
Yeah, so it's the problem for me is like, okay, I can agree that if we're saying that suffering results from desire, which seems totally plausible to me. I mean, I'm kind of I'm
Mm-hmm.
a bit skeptical of that, right? Well, no, I'm very skeptical of that because it's like a universal claim, and you know, I mean, but
Yeah.
it seems pretty plausible, right? That it like,
Okay.
because if you were to change, So in any particular instance of suffering that I can think of, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like if you were to change the desires with respect to the state that's causing suffering, then it wouldn't count as suffering anymore, or at least I wouldn't be inclined to count it as suffering anymore. So for any given
Yeah.
state, if a person like desires to be in that state, then like at least that's going to reduce the suffering. But so yeah, that's fine. But the issue is that it seems like we have a problem here, and the problem is
Okay.
the suffering of life, right? So that's a problem, the pessimistic
Mm-hmm.
conclusion. And then we have a
Yeah.
claim about how to solve this problem, how to, you know, like improve our lives. And it's that part that I think I get stuck on, because if you were to offer me, you know, like a button that I could push and
Mm-hmm.
just remove my desire formation processes, I don't
Yeah.
think I would push it, because
Okay.
I don't I it feels like that sort of state would be, it's just so different to who I am that,
Yeah.
you know, I kind of don't know what I'm stepping into, and whatever it
Yeah.
is, it feels like, well, it's not me, you know. I mean, of course,
Oh
and
yeah.
I know the Buddhist
That's
will be
kind of
like,
true.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, of course it's not you. That's the point, right? Like you're kind of
Yeah.
giving up the conception of self. But even so, I mean, I don't know if I want to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, sure. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Hmm. So just to rephrase, you do think the second truth, like that all desire, um, has as source, like that all suffering has as source, like this desire, like some kind of craving or whatever. Um, but you're just not sure if you wanna like be in the stage without desire. Yeah.
yeah.
That. Okay. Hmm.
I think
No,
it might be
I
worth pointing out that I don't know if I expressed it. I think I said this in the pessimism video as well, but
okay.
for me, like so I think actually the Buddhist view agrees with this as well. So I think Buddhists would say that people are kind of deluded about suffering, that people they underestimate the extent of suffering, because, you know, our desires create like an illusion, right? Where, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we assume that when we satisfy desires, we're going to have lasting pleasure or lasting satisfaction, and we're sort of in this state of, yeah, we're in this kind of deluded state. We're sort of trapped by this illusion.
Yeah.
What ends up happening
Mm-hmm.
as a result of that is we're pursuing things that cause more suffering, but we don't like think we are, as it were. We don't realize that we
Yeah.
are. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is that, so for me, what I mean, again, that speaks to me. That seems very plausible. But then what I would say is, well, look, when I reflect on my life, I see that, I mean, I judge it to be very bad, right? And I think that it is basically, you know, there's this kind of just almost constant sort of state of frustration. There's like
Mm-hmm.
nothing lasting. There's no lasting satisfaction. There's no
Yeah.
sense that of any point in what I'm doing. You know, like all of that is true,
Yeah.
but I only realize that when I think about it. Now, when
Yeah.
I'm actually in like just normal everyday activities, or maybe I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that like doing philosophy is a normal everyday activity. But like when, for instance, I'm in the process of writing a YouTube video, um,
Mm-hmm.
although it's very frustrating, um, I like have this drive, and I sort of imagine this future state where I upload the video and I remember everything from it, and it brings like a great deal of satisfaction, and I'm really happy, and that's what drives me. And because of that, I'm sort of like I'm kind of okay in a sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
difficult to express this, but it's like, well, because I'm deluded. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's only when I reflect on my life that it seems bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, I guess the point really I'm making is like, I don't, at least as far as I'm aware, I don't like have depression or anything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is a sort of conclusion that I've come to intellectually. It's not really a product
Yeah.
of my personality, as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so when people, when you like offer this alternative to me, part of me wants to say, yeah, but although my life is suffering, I'm kind of okay with that. I mean,
Sure.
maybe that doesn't really make sense. I'm not sure that this is coherent, but hopefully that expresses something of
Mm-hmm.
it's it it's like it's as long as I don't think about it, I'm kind of okay because I'm trapped by the illusion, and the illusion is maybe good enough.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then you have all these Buddhists coming up to you, trying to remind you of it. Yeah. That's that's we heard. Um, um, like you said this thing where like um you're kind of in the illusion while like making the video, right? Um, because you're like kind of focused on the thing, trying to like you're just kind of in it, right? If you're not thinking about it. Would you compare this to something like uh having like cold feet, for example, if you're in bed and like you're asleep,
Hmm.
um, but you're like about to wake up, right? So you're like not really conscious yet, um, but you might get like some feeling of botheredness, but you're not really conscious. Um, is it is it is it is it kind of like that, or is it more like an active suppression?
Oh, it's not active. I mean, there's
Okay.
no, it just kind of like I just don't think about it. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
just my attention isn't drawn on it because my attention is on other things. I actually have a better example, I
Okay.
think, at least
Okay.
for my
All right.
case, because
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I have like I get really I have I don't know what exactly the problem is, but like I get this I have something wrong with my hands and like
Okay.
my hands are like constantly cold and in pain, just like all the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's better when the heating's on, but like even like now, I'm like the room is warm, but my hands still feel absolutely freezing, and they really hurt. They don't really hurt.
Hmm.
That's not true. It's a like mild pain. It's like you
Okay.
know if your hands get really cold, and this is going to sound really unsophisticated, but when you move your fingers when your hands are really cold, like it's almost like you can feel the bones scraping. I don't know if you get this. Like you can feel like the joints, like they feel like hard, and I don't know. Maybe not everyone gets this. I do, but anyway, that's basically what my hands are like just all the time, right? But
Okay.
um, so in that sense, I'm in a state of like that's producing suffering, and that's going on
Mm-hmm.
all the time. Um,
Yeah.
but it's not like my attention is on it all the time. It's not like I'm just constantly
Yeah.
thinking, oh God, like my hands hurt. Oh no, my hands are cold.
Yeah.
Oh, right, this is
Yeah.
really bothering me. I mean, when
Uh-huh.
I'm doing other things, if I'm not thinking about it, I guess you could see
Uh-huh.
that as being like I'm in a state of like ignorance with respect to the experiences that I'm having in my hands, right? Like the experiences that my hands are producing. I'm not always
Yeah.
introspectively accessing that. And then that's
Yeah.
kind of okay. It's not as okay as it would be if my hands were just fine, right? But it's
Yeah.
kind of good enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, no, that makes some sense, I think. Um, is just so I understand, right? Um, is it is it like um your like it is it not an experience at all? Because you call it still an experience, but it like does it have an influence on like your like do you feel like worse or whatever when your like hands are cold? Or maybe that's a bad example because your hands are always cold. Um, but maybe you sometimes have warm hands. Like do you feel like it has an influence, or is it just gone like the moment you start doing something else,
Oh,
like get
so
distracted?
I mean, occasionally I can make it go away. Like if I put my hands like directly on a radiator or something, then there's like some
Okay.
relief from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But
Mm-hmm.
I think that so the problem is that I think I understand what you're getting at, but like I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
really know what my own experience is like. And
Yep.
so okay, there's a really nice paper by Eric Schwitzgebel, and I can't remember the name of this paper, but
Okay.
like he's done a lot of work actually on introspection, and he has a
Mm-hmm.
very skeptical line on it. So you know he will say that like we actually um, you know introspection we have very poor access to what our own experiences are like,
Yep.
even from the
Yep.
first person
Yep.
point of view. And one of
Yep.
the examples he gives of this is of two different ways of thinking about consciousness. So
Mm-hmm.
there's what he calls a thin account of consciousness, and on the thin account of consciousness you're conscious of just those things that you are that your attention is directed towards. So your experience consists
Mm-hmm.
of whatever your attention is directed towards. And of course your attention is like
Mm-hmm.
constantly moving between different things. So, you know, like right
Mm-hmm.
now, for instance, my attention is on the light to my right. And okay, now
Mm-hmm.
my attention is on my hands, and now my attention is on my legs. And you know, and so whatever my attention is towards, that's what I'm conscious of. That's the thin account.
Yep.
And then on the thick
Yep.
account, you are conscious of like not just what your attention is directed towards, but there's this like background of
Yep.
like non-attentive things. So like even when I'm not directing my attention towards the light to my right, I'm still
Mm-hmm.
conscious of it. It's still part of the structure of my experience. Even when I'm not directing my attention to my hands, it's still part of the
Mm-hmm.
structure of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so then the question is, which of these is right? Like, are you
Uh-huh.
conscious of the stuff you're just directing your attention towards, or is consciousness much broader? Like, is it thick or is it thin? And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is that when you ask people this, you find about 50% of them say that consciousness is thin, 50% of them say it's thick. But then if you think about it a bit
Sure.
more, it's like, how the hell would you ever know? I mean, like, what possible test could you do to determine which of these is the right account? Like, I mean, I might have the intuition. So my intuition is, I feel like my consciousness is thick, but then
Mm-hmm.
like how would I know that, you know? So how could I test, like, if I say, well, I'm conscious of my hands even when my attention is not directed towards my hands, like
Mm-hmm.
how the hell would I know? I mean, you know, because the minute I think about my hands, obviously then my attention is directed towards them. um,
Mm-hmm.
so the point is that like when we talk about, you know, okay, what is my experience like, and you know, how does this like state of suffering manifest itself in my experience, I don't know the answer to that. um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how I would go about figuring out the answer to that.
Sure. Yeah. Um, may I ask you a question about the stick and thin concept? Um, if like, is it the case that um, is it is it also the case with like emotions? Right? Is it also the case that you would like experience things differently when there's an emotion present versus like another emotion? Would this count as like the background? Because we're often not conscious of our emotions, right?
Did
Or is it just like other visual things?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe I misheard. Did you say that we're not conscious of our emotions?
Uh, I think often our emotions, especially when we're like going about our day, are not our conscious, like in our conscious. We're not like, hey, I am angry. Um, it's like there we have an experience and we respond to it in that way. But
Yeah.
it's like for example, um, I would respond very differently to uh, sounds. And I like I'm really sure. If I'm like really frustrated, right? Like I don't know, so a dog is barking, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like really frustrated. I think um that impacts me like differently from when I'm not like angry at all, or when I'm like just chilling, and like you can go even further with this if you're gonna talk about drugs, right? Like if you want to have like yeah, if you're taking like a hallucinogenic drug or whatever, or weed, um, or an anesthetic, right? You're like whatever's gonna come in is it seems very different than but then again, like it's kind of the question, yeah. Um, it would that also like be in a tick account, or or does that work differently?
Um, so yeah, so I think that we could probably. I mean, so the reason why Schwitzgebel introduces this thick thin distinction is just to like
Mm-hmm.
he's just kind of making a point. He's just trying to like drive home our inability to introspectively access what our experiences are like. I imagine
Uh-huh.
that one could you could like imagine a sort of spectrum of different sort of views here, I guess, where
Yeah.
like there's like a super thin account where it is just whatever your attention is directed towards, that's all you're conscious of, and then
Yeah.
maybe you can build more and more stuff into the background.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, like, I'm still kind of curious about this point about emotion, because I feel like I'm often conscious of my emotions, and I don't I actually don't. I wouldn't say that I have very good acts. Like I don't know my emotions in much detail. So I can say that my state
Okay.
is like happy, sad, angry, but like that's it. I'm not. I'm
Okay.
not somebody who seems. I don't distinguish like really precise emotions. But
Mm-hmm.
I say I think I'm conscious of them quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, if the
Um.
point is just like, well, sometimes we're like motivated by stuff that we don't realize. That's true for me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Sure. Um.
I
I
think
think often we. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say like it can take like I think work to bring some of this stuff to attention, or to realize what's going on
Uh-huh.
sometimes. I mean, certainly when I'm kind of like this with temperature actually. I don't have a very. I'll often find myself getting frustrated, and then I realize, oh, it's because I'm hot. I've got too
Oh yeah.
many
Mm-hmm.
clothes on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really. It doesn't like occur to me. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Mm.
but then I don't know. I mean, whether you would say that. I mean, that's again another question. Like, so is it the case that I'm consciously like, am I conscious of the heat before I become reflectively aware of it? I mean, I don't. I have
Mm-hmm.
no idea. I don't even. Again, I don't know how you would go about even figuring that out.
Yeah. 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 No. I agree. There is also uh a decent amount of like skepticism in like Buddhist schools, especially the Madhyamaka. I
Um,
probably am pronouncing
Before
it wrong.
we could, sorry, I just have to do something
Okay.
quickly. I just
Okay.
have to.
Sure.
Okay, sorry about that. As I realized, like I used that example, and it was a pertinent one because I was sitting there with like 5 layers on, and as I was talking, I realized, wow, I'm like really sweating at the moment.
You're getting really frustrated at my questions. You're like, oh my god, this guy.
No,
Yeah, no.
this is not frustrating. This is an entertaining conversation.
Okay, cool. Um, sure. Um, I was just making a side note that this point about skepticism from the in like internal is also a point made by Buddhists people because in the Buddhist tradition, skepticism is like in various schools a pretty big thing, right? Um, and almost universally, Buddhists try to like they don't have a they don't want to they don't think there's a self, right? And this often means that like the boundary between like outside and inside is illusory according to it. So that's how skepticism from the out like in the outside like kind of is skepticism in the inside, right? Because there's no difference. Um, but so yeah, that's interesting that you yeah, see a similarity there. But I don't know if this is actually discussed in the book by Mark Sitter or if I'm um,
It might be.
talking about like
I haven't read the whole book. So
okay
I read the stuff on, oh, what was it? I think I read the first 4 chapters so far.
okay
So yeah, I don't know. I
okay
mean, I do have some previous exposure to like Buddhist skepticism
yeah
through. I had a conversation with. He was called Unknown Knowns Philosophy, and
yeah
he's kind of. I don't know if he. I don't think he actually calls himself like a Zen Buddhist, but he's influenced by it, and
yeah
he was very unhappy with some of my comments on skepticism because I I used to be. I think I'm a bit more diplomatic about it now, but I have in the past said that skepticism is a position I find annoying.
yeah
You know,
yeah
uh,
yeah.
I don't think that's my view anymore. But
What is your view now?
um, I think that. So I guess I mean maybe I should explain like why I found it annoying in order to explain why I
Sure
changed my mind. So
sure
the
sure
problem that I had with skepticism is that what would end up happening whenever I spoke to skeptics, and when I say skepticism, I should say I'm talking about um, like radical skepticism, right? The view that
mm-hmm.
you know we should suspend judgment just universally. So it's like universal suspension
yeah
of judgment. Um, the problem I had was, look, we all need to make some sort of distinction, right? In terms of like, so we take certain representations, or we like represent the world in a certain way, and we have reasons for that, right? And then we can engage in a conversation about, you know, what makes a representation of the world better or worse. And that's the case even if you're a
mm-hmm.
skeptic. So, you know, you
Mm-hmm.
can say that you're a skeptic, but like you're still going to, you know, take the stairs rather than jump out the window. And like,
yeah
well, why is that? It's, you know, I mean, it's because you're representing the world as being a certain way and then you're acting on that representation. And and then what I say is, okay, but that's just what belief is, right? So like when you say that you're
mm-hmm.
suspending judgment, right? But really you end up like you end up making the same distinction as me, but for some reason you just
yeah
don't want to call it a belief, you know. And so that was like annoying to me. But
yeah
I'm not so annoyed by it because I realized, well, I mean, even if that's true, at the end of the day, it's just a terminological dispute. And I think that
uh-huh
it's also pretty plausible to me now that, you know, like when we, there may be kind of like certain, even if we have the same position from an intellectual point of view, and it's just got different terminology, there may be certain psychological benefits to framing it in terms of skepticism. And ultimately, I mean, I my own like epistemology concedes quite a lot to skeptics because you know I don't think there is
mm-hmm.
any like you know justification. I mean, I think that like when we hold beliefs, it's really a matter of kind of like just taking a shot in the dark. You know, quite a lot of the time.
uh-huh
Um, I mean, certainly when it comes to like our foundational claims, you know, we're just sort of taking a shot in the dark. And
mm-hmm.
you know, for me, I evaluate like I would say, well, rationality is just really a matter of like making sure that your beliefs are coherent, broadly speaking, and you know we can apply
Mm-hmm.
them in successful action, um,
Mm-hmm.
and and that concedes a lot to skepticism. Um,
yeah it does
I think that you know, there's a sense. So like when somebody's coming from like the skeptical tradition, I can look at that as being like, okay, there are maybe psychological benefits to this in terms of, you know, achieving like peace of mind. There's you know, resistance to dogmatism. I can kind of see that, and so it doesn't really annoy me so much. And I think that I'm more inclined now to like emphasize the similarities between our positions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one way you might look at my position is like, okay, um, we still need an account, even if you're a skeptic. You still want to give some sort of account of like, you know, organizing our representations of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's what I offer. So that's the story very briefly, I think.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Um, you read the chapter on conventional truth versus open truth, right?
Um, I don't remember it did if he had a whole chapter on this. He talked about it in the chapter on non-self. But maybe is there like
Okay.
another chap? If there was like another chapter that specifically goes into that in more detail, then I haven't read that yet. Um,
Uh, no, it might just be a subsection.
yeah, okay,
Uh,
I did, yeah.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, because like, uh, when I think about skepticism, nowadays, I I agree with you that you cannot like uh, that you're always like representing the world in a certain way, right? But we can call it like conventional truth, right? Like our conventional reality,
Hmm.
um, and just be well agnostic on like whether whether it actually is like applied, like whether it's in line with like the ultimate truth, right? Um, with although like whether there's actually something there, because like a big part in conventional truth is that we make up the truth conditions for things, right? Like we say, okay, well, when this is like this or whatever, like when the cup looks like it's on the table, right? And we call it like those things, then it's true that the cup's on the table, right? Like we kind of um we just like invent the conditions um as a way of um is understanding the skeptical things. But yeah, I was curious. What did you think of like the two truths like approach to like um the non-self and the skepticism?
Um, I mean, I don't know so much about like the non-self thing. I think so. Generally
Okay.
speaking, I guess that my view of truth, I think, would probably be considered an account of conventional truth, right? That's just my view of truth in general. Like, so I'm
Sure.
I'm a you know like I'm actually like a kind of card carrying constructivist and relativist about truth, right? And
Mm-hmm.
those are not popular positions, but I don't really see them as actually all that radical. I mean, um,
Sure.
you know, I think that it really just kind of follows from a sort of, you know, empiricist and nominalist account where it's like, you know, we are ultimately the ones who are, you know, drawing the lines between things, and
Yep.
you know, we have to like set the standards for what counts as truth. For in the
Mm-hmm.
case of, you know,
Yep.
a claim about the empirical world, we have to set the standards for what counts as a match, like, and we
Yep.
have to, you know, draw the boundaries between entities, and that's something we're doing. It's not something that like
Yep.
is given to us in the world. So that's my sort of stance. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you know, lots of people disagree with it, but it's not a crazy stance. um,
Sure.
Now I think that like when I look at the examples that at least Sideritz gives, you know, he uses this example of like the house, right? And the house as
Mm-hmm.
being like, well, actually, it's just a jumble of parts. You know, the wall,
Mm-hmm.
the windows, they happen to be, you know,
Yep.
like we've drawn certain boundaries, and you know,
Yep.
we call that a house, and we like like we imagine it as a single thing, but we're the
Mm-hmm.
ones, we impose the individuality onto the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But then I suppose then, so that's fine as an account of truth. But then if we're using this to draw a distinction, my question is, all right, well, what exactly is ultimate truth supposed to be?
Yeah.
And that's what I
Yeah.
can't really get my head around, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is, well, all truth is conventional truth, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the concept of ultimate truth, I just don't think I can give a coherent account of that. And actually, that's why I would consider myself, a relativist, right? Because ultimately, I don't think we can like take that further step of like saying, this is the way the world is, like independently of any of our conceptual schemes or epistemic
Yeah.
perspectives. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Um.
I think that's where I land on this.
Yeah. Um. I like when it comes to ultimate truth. Um. I think it's often not like it some Buddhist there are varying ways of looking at this, but many of the Buddhist philosophy I have read, um, ultimate truth is not like the mind independent reality we're talking about. Ultimate truth is often very much conceived as a kind of it's like it has to do with like um, the non-illusion of everything with like the enlightened. It's basically how the enlightened person would see the world. Um, and um, yeah,
Can I just
it's
ask,
yeah,
when so I guess where I like, okay, so here's what I would the way I'm thinking about it is that truth is like a property of propositions. Now,
yeah,
I guess then, so when you say like ultimate truth is about how the enlightened person sees the world, I mean,
yes.
is this going to, so are we claiming that there are certain propositions that they could say that would count as true, right? Or are we talking about like, just the kind of the raw experience, right? But we're not saying that it can be expressed in propositions. Does that question make sense?
No.
Okay. Um, so, okay, maybe I should say, it, is there a are there propositions that the enlightened person could state, right, that they would say are true?
Um, I think it depends on the school of Buddhism.
Okay.
Um, so and I don't know all of Buddhism. That's a lot, but uh, I know that um, in like popular I think Theravada Buddhism and in Madhyamaka Buddhism, it's um, it's often seen as like I don't know if you many of Buddhists philosophy use a four valued truth um, system of
Okay.
logic. So like that like this yeah propositions can also be neither true nor false or like both true and false. Um, and there might even be a fifth one because there are texts where in which the Buddha is saying that even these four ones are like uh, not they don't apply to like a certain proposition.
Okay.
Um, but from some of accounts of what I've read is that the enlightened person sees all things as neither true nor false. Um, so uh, kind of applies that true value to all the propositions. Um, yeah, um, but uh, in Buddhism, there's also like a lot of what do you say, mythology, right? In which like enlightened persons um, become gods, right? And they can see like ultimate reality and can fly and that kind of stuff, right? Um, so it's um, yeah. I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, I guess it does. I mean, it's so. yeah, if we're saying that from the enlightened point of view, I'm just going with the first one you said. You know, things are neither true nor false. I mean, I
Yes.
think that would make sense from my perspective because, you know, I if I so my view is, well, you know, we can only like assign truth value from the point of view of a particular conceptual scheme, say, and if you
Yes.
then if you give up conceptual schemes entirely, then there's just nothing
Yeah.
to be said for, you know, truth and falsehood, right? So I guess
Yeah.
that does, yeah, that sort of fits, I think, my view. But then, of course,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we're not really talking. Are we talking about ultimate truth? I mean, it seems like we're talking. It seems well. It seems like nothing
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
true
Yes.
or false, right? We're
Yeah.
outside the domain of
Yeah.
truth value.
Yeah. No, I agree. Um, the term is somewhat misleading. Um, in yeah, I've had conversations with other people about um, how ultimate truth is a really
You
yeah.
said you said that
We disagree.
there are different like approaches in Buddhism. Do you have a favored approach to thinking about conventional ultimate truth?
Um, I have a favorite account of thinking of conventional ultimate truth. Um, so I do really like, uh, I guess, a realization personally of that we construct our um, like truth condition,
Hmm.
like kind of like how you frame it. I like before I was thinking about this. I this is maybe just not the intuitive way of like maybe not the way I was raised. I should maybe say, um, or like how I originally told the truth, right? That truth was something like outside of you, right? And um, outside of humans, and we were like discovering it, right? And not like constructing it as a
Yeah.
making up the condition. So um, that's what I really like about, and I think that's the notion of conventional truth. Um, when it comes to ultimate truth, uh, I um, honestly, uh, honestly, I often don't know um, the what Buddhists like are talking about when they're talking about ultimate truth. Um, and um, so yeah, that might be a little bit of a dissatisfactory answer, but
No,
um,
that's totally fine. You know, nothing wrong
yeah,
with that answer. That's cool. That answers the question.
yeah.
I take it that
Um,
you have not achieved enlightenment yet. Then.
no, I guess not. Um, yeah, um, no. Yeah. I like I there like we've there are ways of I think that the notion of ultimate truth is often somewhat paradoxical. Um, in many of the no, I should say paradoxical. I should say contradictory. No, inconsistent. Um, in many of the ways it has been formulated in like other texts, right?
Hmm.
Um, like I often read Buddhist texts and discuss them with people, but then we're like, hey, this doesn't square with this, and we kind of want to have a consistent account of this, right? Um, so, um, but yeah, I don't have a favorite account, and like and the other ones I just don't understand often. There's often a lot of talk about like emptiness. You probably read this in the Mark Schiller's book so far. Um, like emptiness of that there's no essence to things, right?
Hmm.
Um, and um, that things are what's the word? They have dependent origination, so that they're yeah kind of always depending on things and not really standing on their own. Um, but it might be the same thing as something in essence. But um, what what is it like? I yeah, I just don't often just don't understand what is talking about when they're talking about ultimate truth from that perspective. But yeah, maybe that's the point. I sometimes think, but yeah, yeah. I did want to talk to you about your unless you wanted to say something else about this.
I don't know. I think that I don't have any other comments as
Okay,
that I can think of.
so sure. You ended your um your video on Buddhism, like your last video on Buddhism of today, I think, by stating, okay, well, maybe, like you said, maybe it's like happiness, and attaining enlightenment, right? Like working for happiness that doesn't work, right? Like maybe it's less productive, right? Because then you're gonna be obsessed with, hey, am I happy? Am I happy? And then you'll not be happy. And but then you said, maybe the analogy doesn't completely work because with happiness it's just one thing, but with enlightenment it's everything, right? At least if I'm rephrasing your thoughts correctly. And then you ended the video by saying, okay, but maybe this is where we're like past like intellectual thinking conceptualization on like the Buddhist paradox of enlightenment. But I disagree.
Okay.
I don't think that. I think that's a really bad answer if a Buddhist give that. If a Buddhist would give that by saying like, oh well, this would be the end of like our thought. So like this is how I think Buddhists may, if it's possible at all, to be enlightened. Right, that's still a question to be out there. But if it's possible to be enlightened, I think this is how they achieve it. And I think we can understand it maybe rationally, but maybe of that. I think Buddhists go into meditation. Meditation is called practice, right? You're gonna practice, sit down and look at your like thoughts and feelings and desires and see if you can like observe them in such a way that you eliminate them, right? There are like many ways of a lot of sorts of meditation, right? And not all of them are even centered around desire. And there are conceptions of enlightenment that don't have anything to do with desire.
Okay.
But or like that have like desire as like a consequence, but that's not the point of like being enlightened. But in some Buddhist traditions, it's definitely the case that you what they call equanimity, like this, you don't really like care about, like you're just fine whatever your state of consciousness is, right? You don't really have like any desires. You're just kind of content. They often phrase this as a recognition of experience as already perfect. Yeah. So what they often do is they train, right? A lot, like 20 years or whatever, right? You can imagine that if you're doing this much practice, you get into a habit of, well, doing these things. I'm gonna leave kind of unspecified. Doing these things that ultimately make a desire disappear, right, or fade away. I don't know what the English word is. Let's just go for disappear. And then the point I kind of want to make is that
sorry, just one second.
Okay.
Oh. Sorry, that was my brother coming in. but he walked out again
No problem.
straight afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
No, the point I was trying to make is that I think that the paradox of like enlightenment it can be solved if we think about meditation practice as habit building. Um, if you have like a very, very strong habit of doing that thing that eliminates desire, um, then um, you can keep doing your habits even if you're like not like desiring to do them, right? Um, you does that kind of make sense? What I'm saying with habits? Um,
Yeah, I think that that does. Um, there are certain so like there are certain things that I mean actually I suppose this is gonna we're gonna have to say this for almost everything somebody does because presumably in order to keep working at the meditation stuff, um, you're going to have to keep like feeding yourself. But if you've overcome the desire to uh, have food or the desire to continue living and so on, then you presumably just be doing that out of habit. I find it
yes.
very hard to comprehend that, but I feel
Agree.
like this is just a limitation of my imagination because I mean there are people who who just say like I mean again it's like I can't overrule people's claims about their own experience. The people who say like no I don't have any like I just don't have desires. I'm just acting
Mm-hmm.
on like habit. It's like automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't really think of the only examples I can think of that make sense to me, like in my own life, would be cases of, if I, um, you know, put my arm somewhere that's too hot, I just automatically
Mm-hmm.
move it out the way, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to, more sort of sophisticated actions, that seems to always be driven by desire for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, but then I
Okay.
don't really know. I mean, again, I'm also pretty skeptical of like uh, accounts of my own experience, as I
Yeah.
expressed earlier. So maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I guess the point that I wanted to make is that um, one's desire for enlightenment can be uh, an object of this habit as well. Um, of like the habit of like expert meditation, yeah, master or whatever, of learning how to like eliminate desires, right? This is a very strong habit of him, and one of the objects of this habit could be like kind of an automatic process, the object, the desire to be enlightened. And that's I think the way one could say
Mhm.
when could go around um, the paradox of enlightenment. Um, yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
that makes sense. So that's to deny, if I remember the way that it's stated. I think that's the fourth proposition that you're only going to put work into something if you desire the foreseen results of it. Um,
yes.
but I guess this is like, well, no, because you can form habits, and then those habits occur like automatically.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do get,
Um,
like I do get those states where you're just acting without really thinking about it. That does
mhm.
happen to me, but I always need like I think it always seems like there's a desire to it that initiates them in any specific context. So like if I'm washing the dishes, I suppose my mind might go blank, but then I'm gonna have a desire to get the dishes done. Like that's what. Or if I'm working on maybe I'm writing a video, like I might end up just sort of doing it automatically. Um, but that's
Mhm.
initiated by the desire to make a video.
Sure. Hmm. Um, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Like the when your habits like come up, they only come up um automatically in a kind of like um pre-designed context, which is motivated by a desire.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Um, but I think you probably have habits that um might not be like that. Like I don't know, like if you like um fumble your fingers in a certain way, or maybe like even less conscious things, right? Like um I don't know, put more weight on one feet than on another or
Yeah.
whatever. Um tendencies like that. Um or like talkative, like when you talk you move with your hands or whatever. Um facial expressions. Um those might be habits that would be um, so habitual that you might not um, need like any pro- provoking. No, that's not the English word. Um, provocation
Yeah.
um, of like deciding. Um, yeah. Um, would you agree with that or not?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose, you know, I guess you can like maybe imagine it as um or not imagine, but if you think about like other people's behavior, you can you can interpret it very often without appealing to desires. You can appeal to like sort of scripts that we run in response to particular situations. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess like when
Mm-hmm.
you drive a car, I mean
Mm-hmm.
maybe you might have a desire to go to a particular destination, but then when it comes to um, if I was to ask, well, why did the car stop at the red light? Right? Why has this person stopped at the red light? And then like why have they pulled in at a particular place to let other cars pass? Um, I mean, there is, I guess you could say, well, there's a desire not to cause accidents, but like maybe maybe this is where we should sort of invoke Occam's razor and say, well, you don't really need to postulate that. It's enough to just say,
Yeah.
like, you're trained to follow certain rules, and then in
Yes.
response, like, once you have enough training, then in response to a
Yes.
particular situation, you just act in a particular way.
Yes. 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 I agree. I think um, that's in accordance with my experience.
Right.
Um, I yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I'm just unusual in this respect because, like, when I'm driving, I mean, I probably am just like always thinking like, oh my god, how do I avoid crashing? I really don't want to die. You know, like I feel driven by desire, but maybe this is again just like a quirk of my psychology.
Uh, yeah,
It's
I,
it's at the forefront of
I'm
my mind.
afraid. Yeah, no, I'm afraid that, yeah, um, I don't experience it that way. Yeah, but may, yeah, kind of depends on what's on the forefront of your mind. Like if you're really worried about crashing, then it might be in the forefront. Yeah, but yeah, okay. They don't want to say anything else about it. Hmm. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you. Um, okay, we have some doubts about the third noble truth, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but let's for the sake of argument, just grant the third noble truth. Okay, just we're saying, okay, let's say it's true. Maybe it's not, but let's just say. Um, what do you think about the fourth? Do you think it's any um in any way like following from the ones before, or would you, even if you were convinced by the third, still like object to the fourth?
I'm not sure because I don't really know the fourth one in enough detail. In fact, if you asked me now to explain what the Eightfold Path is, I mean, I could maybe do like half of it. I
Okay.
because there's the sort of intellectual content, which is, you know, like there's the sort of philosophical conclusions, you know, and that's what I've read about. Um, as I understand it, the fourth is like a set of prescriptions. Like that's more about, okay, how in practice do we actually overcome desire,
Yes.
right? And
Yes. Yes.
I just haven't really like read much about that, so
Okay.
you know, I don't know. Like it
Okay.
might
Okay.
so maybe, but
Okay.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Um. Yeah.
I
Um.
mean, what do you think? Do you think it's a do you think that's the way to go? Yeah.
Um. Do I think the Eightfold Path is the way to go? Um. I um. Do I think the Eightfold Path is the way to go? I think so, but I think the Eightfold Path is um like a first try, but not the best try, because like I think the fourth path is really a kind of plan about human, like biology or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
human psychology maybe. It's about like um what are the most efficient ways in which one can like eliminate desires and attain this specific form of enlightenment that we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it seems that that's an empirical question, right? Um, or and it might differ from person to person, right? As well. Um, but certainly many people like some people really prefer some meditation styles over others, right? And then go to like a meditation center or whatever and really dislike it, and then other people go there and really like it, or feel like they're making spiritual progress there. I should maybe say. So, using the word right. Mhm. But yeah, so I think it's a first try, but no, I don't think it's the way to go. Um,
Okay.
I yeah, I think it's I think probably so like maybe I should say this. I I think the 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 elimination of desire is really like in my personal view, I think it's like um the Buddha, and I talks about like stages of enlightenment as well in I don't know which text comes through. I think is the no, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna say anything because I might be wrong. Um and the 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 stages in which one starts eliminating desires are I think the third and the second and the third stage of the four stages. Um um but the first and the fourth state are in part about um, like first noticing this um, like lack of self, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that um, it is really um, I think it's for a reason that they are in that order. Um, I think starting to like starting to recognize experience as perfect. That's my way of saying um, like eliminating desires, because eliminating desires kind of sounds um, yeah, it sounds maybe a little bit like a value judgment of
Yeah.
like desire bad,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
while that's really like the not the way to think about it in my opinion. um, I think the way to think about it is is to recognize experience as perfect, and that also implies that experience is already perfect, right? That there's really like not anything like to do, right? It's not like you have to change experience, right? Yeah, which is also like a big theme in Buddhism, right? That yeah. So I guess that's just very briefly my account of what if it is possible at all.
Okay.
Yeah, which I am not sure about you. I I don't know, honestly. Um, it yeah, if it's possible to attain, like,
I mean, I think that yeah, what you said sounds. I mean that's what I would have thought intuitively. Like if you're because Buddhism has been around for a very long time, and I mean generally speaking, when people who were writing thousands of years ago made claims about the best ways to achieve particular ends, um, they often didn't get it quite right. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
it wouldn't be surprising if, like, once we've specified a particular goal, we have better ways of achieving that
yes,
goal. Um,
yeah,
and I mean, like,
yeah,
this is where, as much as I appreciate the sort of, I think that in some forms of Buddhism, you get this kind of skeptical, non-dogmatic approach. But,
mm-hmm.
when you start sort of saying, okay, like this is the set of prescriptions, this is the way to live in order to achieve particular goals. um,
Yes,
that kind of just become that's that at that point it's like, well, that's just kind of dogmatic. I mean, you should be
mm-hmm.
open to, like, maybe we're just completely wrong. I mean, maybe the way to achieve this is something completely different. In fact, I mean,
Yes,
I have been told that, well, you can achieve the same state by taking a particular form of DMT, um, and you can have it
yes,
in 5 minutes. So uh, that's totally different, right? um,
yes,
I think it seems like we should probably be open to these possibilities.
yes. I agree. Um, yeah, I agree. Um, yeah, and I've been posing my questions very much in a like the traditional for um noble truths, the questions to you, right? But um like many like modern now we're really crossing the boundary between spirituality and philosophy, but many modern like practicing um like Western or Eastern um spiritual people who are spiritually interested in like Buddhism, right? Um, not from a philosophical perspective. There might not be a like clear line of the yeah, they do often like phrase these in different ways, but um, I do think there's one part about Buddhism that's kind of fundamentally dogmatic, um, or maybe dogmatic is not the right word, but yeah, I was curious what you think about this. So very very important in um, current like um, people think about like spiritual progress often in terms of insight, right? In terms of, hey, have you attained this insight of like impermanence yet?
Hmm.
Have you attained it? And this of skepticism, of non-self, right? Of whatever, right? Um, and but insight is supposed to be like not just like a very strong belief, right? Like insight is supposed to be like complete realization, right? Like uh, credence 100%. Um, or maybe that's not even the right word to say. It's um, yeah, and that does strike me as from a first person perspective, like no, that's not the right word. Like from in my opinion, somewhat um, dogmatic. Maybe there are ways around it, um, but but yeah, um, And that does seem to be central to like the Buddhists, or like many of the spiritual paths, even in skeptical Buddhism. Right? Yeah, yeah,
So is the thought that it's they, you know, when it calls itself skeptical, the skepticism is really just restricted to like some of our common sense beliefs, but in fact they are making substantive claims about the way the world is. Like, for instance, you know, it's just a fact that, you know, of like non-self. It's a fact that there are no selves, and that's not
yes.
really a kind of skepticism.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is something
yes.
that struck me as, yeah, as odd as well. Um, I mean, again, I haven't really read a lot of Buddhism, so I mean, I don't know how much of a problem this is, or whether this has been addressed or whatever. But you know, if you're if you're making claims about the way the world is, and you're saying, you know, like most people are in a state of ignorance, and there's a way out of that ignorance, and there's a way of accessing reality. If you're saying all of that, that's not really a kind of skepticism. I mean, what you're
No,
doing is, you know, you're maybe you're offering an alternative epistemology. I mean, you might be saying that our usual ways of forming knowledge are defective, or maybe they don't give us access to, you know, ultimate reality or whatever. But if there is a way of accessing it, um, then that doesn't seem like skepticism to me.
yes. I I I think many um yeah, many schools of especially traditional Buddhism have a lot of metaphysical baggage.
Right.
Um, when it
I mean, really, it's almost it's like, you know, that's no more skeptical than Plato, right? I mean, Plato agreed that, you know, the world of experience is completely misleading, and but there's
yeah
a way out, right? We have a way of accessing ultimate reality, the world of the forms. So, you know,
yeah sure
that's not a form of
yeah
skepticism.
yeah. Oh yeah. Although I do wanna say that
I mean, I'm not
yeah
saying they're entirely identical. I just mean in terms of like, you know,
yeah
rejecting certain common sense beliefs and then offering an
yes
alternative. That's,
yes
yeah.
yes. That's a common theme in philosophy. Um, yeah um yeah no I agree. There are um there are traditions of Buddhism um who are less on the religious side, right, and more on the well, um, spiritual side or whatever you want to call it. But I think the majority of Buddhists alive today are religious Buddhists, right? These are people who are like burning Buddhists and um, that kind of stuff, right? Um, because like we have to recognize that Buddhism, or in many ways, has practiced as a religion as well, right? Like
Hmm.
I've personally visited like um, temples of the Buddha, right? And you have like massive golden Buddha statues, right? And people like serving food to it, right? Um, this is um, yeah, not the type of Buddhism that we're discussing at all, right? But it's also called Buddhism. Um, yeah, and then but I do think you have certain traditions, like especially like the Zen tradition, or China it's called, or previously it's called the Chan tradition, which is the mother basically of Zen, um, where skepticism does play this big role, and many of the texts in Zen, they're called koans, I think, um, or um, do have this thing of hey, look for yourself, right? Because I think most of modern spirituality is more modern Buddhism is formulated as not really like the dogmatic like this way, this is the way it is, right? But just like, but it's often formulated as like, hey, look, isn't it true that you also experience that like your desires are often like don't really give you any satisfaction or whatever, right? It would
Hmm.
be um, asking the question instead of like posing the universal truth of like life is suffering, right? Which is a less dogmatic way of saying. But I certainly agree with you. Most of Buddhism is, yeah, most traditional Buddhism is has a lot of metaphysical background. I agree. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we talked about a lot of stuff already. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. That was fun. Um,
I had a lot of
I
fun.
was a little bit concerned because you know, I'm like, well, you know, I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to talk to people about whatever. But I was like, I don't really know this topic. But I think that it
No,
didn't
sure.
seem to matter. I think that that was
No.
quite an interesting conversation. In any case, so
Yeah.
thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It was it was a lot of fun, and yeah. Um, if you ever wanna yeah talk again, just hit me up.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Yeah.
was there anything else?
Well. Um. I still have a lot of questions for you, but I guess I'll keep them for your like next Q&A.
I
Or
mean, I'm I'm not doing anything like tonight.
okay.
If the I don't
Okay.
know. It just seemed like the conversation reached a. It was like, oh, is that the end? It felt like that was maybe a natural end point. But if you wanted to
Yes.
continue, then I'm happy to continue. I wasn't like, oh, I need to go away. I thought you were done. That was.
Okay. Um. Yes, but um, the questions that I have for you often don't have anything to do with Buddhism.
Oh right, I
Um.
see. It's kind of I
So we're
actually so I don't know what you think. I thought this was a pretty cool conversation. I would be quite happy to upload this. Um,
okay.
how do you feel
Yeah.
about that?
I'm just gonna like ask you questions about like coherentism and voluntarism and like sensitivity condition and um then you'll be like, wait, what happened in the second part of this conversation? So yeah, that was kind of my thought behind that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Um,
I'm
um,
I'm
yeah.
gonna stop the recording there then.